Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. The title of the webinar, What is a Job Coach? And just to let you know, there will be two parts to this video. So once the first one has finished playing, we'll go ahead and start the second one up. If you have any questions at all during the course of the webinar, we're lucky enough to have Rachel Rounds, one of the presenters in the webinar, here on hand to answer any questions you might have. We're asking that if you have questions about the content of the webinar, we'd like to have you put them in the Q&A section. That'll give Rachel a chance to answer them if she can during the presentation, and will allow her to see them, to answer them, or just kind of get prepared to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. Also, if you have any sort of problems with your technology, or if something's not getting through, please put a quick note in the chat box, and we'll do whatever we can to get you going as soon as possible. This is a fantastic presentation. I've watched it a couple times now, and it's really wonderful. Just wanted to mention too, after the session, we will have some information for you about getting your CRC credits. So if you can be patient with us and wait until the end of the presentation, we'd be glad to share some more information about that with us. So without further ado, I think I will go ahead and start up the video. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, welcome to What is a Job Coach? We're going to give you a brief overview of the role of a job coach in the workplace. My name is Rachel Rounds. I am the Business Connections Program Manager at VCU RRTC.
Hi there, my name is April Lynch, and I am a Support Employment Specialist with VCU RRTC.
So we're going to answer the question, what is a job coach? What is our role? Who is this person on the job coach that is assisting somebody with a disability? So a job coach's responsibility is to help an individual with a disability to locate and maintain employment. And we are doing very individualized services. We're getting to know those folks really well in order to make a good job placement.
We are looking to make an appropriate positive job match for this individual based on their support needs and their overall strengths. Our services are commissioned through DARS, the Department of Aging Rehabilitative Services, and that is our main referral source. Some synonymous terms you might hear on job sites at times for an employment specialist or a job coach might also be a life coach, a vocational rehab counselor, a staffing specialist, or a team consultant. We like to mix it up.
So where does the job coach role begin, and how does that affect you as the employer? It's useful to understand where the job placement process begins and to understand that the role of the job coach and the needs of the client. So there are 5 stages in supported employment. It starts with intake, then it moves to situational assessment. Maybe. Some people don't start in situational assessment. If somebody has a clear job goal, then they are going to start off in job development, and then we move into job site training, and then when somebody is independent and working on their job successfully, we back off in a process called fading, which we'll discuss later, and they go into follow along, where we're checking in on them periodically throughout the month to make sure everybody's still happy. So April, you want to talk about the intake?
Sure. So starting with the customer intake is where we really get to know the client. A lot of the time this can look different based on the support network or the family that is involved with this particular individual, but we do encourage that anyone who is considered a part of their support team to be a part of this meeting, so we can gather as much positive information as we can. This also is a time for us to do rapport building, which is basically establishing a relationship with the client and having trust and understanding to what their goals are. Throughout this process, we'll be gathering personal information. We're hoping to gain information about volunteer experience or anything that could really make this individual valuable in the job search. And then particularly, we're looking for their strengths and overall support needs that may be identified in the future for job development as well as job site training. So basically summing that all up as the goals for employment for that individual.
So before they meet with us, they're also meeting with DARS and trying to establish employment goals. So we're working very closely with DARS to meet those same goals. If we find that what that individual has stated that they're interested in isn't working out, we can go back to DARS and have a discussion and maybe determine a new employment goal. So what is a situational assessment? This is for somebody who may be of transition age. It could be somebody who acquired a disability and could no longer do what they used to do in the workplace. And we are really just trying to figure out what this person's skills and abilities and likes are. We are doing this in a real work setting. It's not contrived. It's actual work for 2 to 4 hours typically for each assessment. And we're looking for all kinds of things. Did they show up on time? Were they dressed appropriately? Did they have the stamina? You know, all kinds of things that we can gather in order to help determine an appropriate job goal.
And then also taking it back to the intake, when we hear what their hopes and dreams are for employment, we really try to accommodate that in the situational assessment process. However, sometimes we meet clients who may share that they want to be a wizard because they love Harry Potter. That may not be the most realistic job goal at this point in time. So we're going to do our best to help them identify skills that, you know, will make them feel as if they can work towards a sustainable goal.
One of my favorite examples of why to do a situational assessment is a lot of times people will say they want to work with animals. So we'll schedule an assessment at maybe a doggy daycare or a vet, and then they realize they have to clean up after the animals, and then they decide, really, I just like my animal. So it took that assessment, though, for them to try it out and decide whether they liked or disliked this kind of work. So I usually use that example when I'm talking about assessments. And again, just to come back to what we're looking for in situational assessments, we're looking for the current skills that they have, the skills that they said that they have in the intake. Does that match up with what their abilities are? Unidentified skills that we hadn't talked about in the intake, like I said, stamina. Can they handle the task load? Exposure to new environment? Do they want to work with more men or more women, or do they care? Interpersonal skills and how to best communicate and teach this person when they do find a job. You want to take this one?
So what exactly makes a good assessment? The employment specialist or job coach will go and meet with the manager or employer on that particular business site and identify some tasks that could be helpful in the assessment process for that particular client. But then also we want to deliver for the business. We want to meet the business is the customer as well. So we want to meet those needs. So identifying a task list for that particular assessment date could be beneficial for not only the client and the job coach, but for the employer as well. So making that a positive experience with planning ahead and having some expectations for the assessment. And then one of the biggest pieces is having a safe environment to be able to assess our clients and allow them to feel comfortable to really show us their skill set and just overall getting that information that we need to further the job search and hopefully make them a future employee for a business.
And another thing is businesses can tend to have questions about liability in assessments because the individual is not an employee, and what happens if they get hurt during the assessment. In our situation, if the individual was injured on the assessment, our VR agency has coverage to ensure that the business is safe and sound in case anything happens to the consumer. And if anything happened to one of us on the job site, we have workers' compensation through our employer. So then once we gather all this information from situational assessment, we've determined an appropriate job goal, we're going to start to hit the pavement and look for employment. So we have compiled all the information gained from the intake and the assessment, and we're going out there to look for a good job match. The process varies for each individual. All of our services are very individualized, and so I always kind of say we're not going to put a square peg into a round hole. If I know that a fast food position exists, but I have a consumer who's looking for clerical work, I'm not going to stick them in the fast food position just because I know it's available. Our goal is long-term employment, so we're hoping to find a good job match to
best fit that client's support needs.
Thank you.
I like what you said earlier, Rachel, when you brought up how sometimes our clients go straight into job development and they skip over the situational assessment process. We have experienced clients who have been in volunteer positions for years and gaining this exposure to a job site, building rapport with these management teams, but then needing that support to further that job placement process. So that's when the employment specialist can come in and assist that client in any paperwork that's necessary and pretty much just advocating for employment.
So some of the things that we do is, I would say one of the least successful things is navigating job boards. That's not to say it doesn't work, because we have made placements that way, but really it's about creating relationships in the community and introducing yourself to business owners and hiring managers, community networking, where, again, we're taking our clients' interests into mind and we are going out there and trying to find a good job match for them. Another thing we do is a job analysis, and hopefully, and we'll touch on this again later, but hopefully an employer will allow us to maybe take a tour of the facility and allow us to go, okay, this isn't what I thought it was, this might not be the right match, or this is exactly what I thought it was, and I've got the perfect person for this position. So again, it's more about establishing relationships in the community, and that's how we make our best matches.
And sometimes when we do make those best matches and then we create these relationships with employers, it can continue to additional placements, or even receptiveness of what we call a job carve or a restructured position. And this would be tailoring a position or maybe even creating a brand new position that best fits your business production needs as well as the client's strengths. So I don't know if we want to touch specifically on that, but...
Well, I was just going to mention, I really love it when we've already created a great relationship with a particular employer, and when they have a need, they reach out to us, making our jobs a lot easier. So those relationships are really important to us and for the success of the consumer. So here are some ways that we assist our clients with job-seeking skills. We will create and tailor resumes to each individual employer that we are, we may be looking for a couple different kinds of jobs, so we'll tailor their resumes for the employer that we're applying for. We'll assist with online applications. We may even do applications on their behalf with their permission. We'll practice interviews. And do you want to speak about being the liaison?
Yeah, so at times we would refer to ourselves as being a liaison between the employer and the client to help advocate for their strengths and their support needs through the interview process. This may be talked about later on as far as some interview etiquette with employers and our clients, but really allowing the employer to be open and honest about the process and then allowing us to best prepare our client for that process.
Well, that brings us to the end of part one of What is a Job Coach? If you have questions, please feel free to post them on the web board. Thank you. Hey, and welcome back to part two of What is a Job Coach? I am Rachel Rounds, a Business Connections Program Manager.
Hi, I'm April Lynch, and I'm an employment specialist with VCU-ROTC.
So now we're going to talk about if you've decided to hire one of the people that we work with, what are the next steps?
So if you have chosen to hire one of our clients as one of your employees, It would look like whatever your business's onboarding process may be. And this really varies between each business. Some businesses may have a new employee orientation where we will come along and attend this with our clients. Also, we know that paperwork is typically a part of this process as well, and we are happy to serve as the support and liaison in that process to make sure that that is completed in an efficient manner. Also, just the overall transition of our client into the workplace as your employee, helping them adjust and adapt to the new setting, learning their routines, and we'll get more into that when we get into the goals of job site training. But overall, we really do encourage employers to have their employees ask us questions, and we can also make this a part of a disability awareness training or education process to really give you and your employees a better idea of supported employment.
Which is also good when people have diversity initiatives that they are working on, that we can help with that. So once we get going in the job coach is going to be on site with that person until they are independent in their position. We're going to help them learn the essential functions of their job. We're going to help them learn the expectations. We're going to help them, introduce them to their coworkers and their supervisors and help them figure out the chain of command. We are hoping to be a big part of this team and to communicate effectively with management and with the consumer. And we want to ensure consistency with the understanding of independence as a goal. We want the employer to know that our plan is not to be there indefinitely. We will be there and we will train this person at the rate that they are able to be trained, and then we will eventually start to fade off. But we're hoping that, we don't want to fade too quickly. We want, as they become independent in their tasks, we'll start to fade away at those moments. Systematic data collection is performed by the coach, and this is a way for us to observe and measure how they are increasing their independence and what they're, how to gauge our training for their work.
And we'll be breaking those different routines down for them as well based on their support needs. That may look like introducing a routine of clocking in, and we're going to break those steps down until the client becomes fully independent in it and the client and the employer is satisfied in that area. So that kind of goes into our next area as far as different workplace routines. Again, this varies business to business. Some places may have a timesheet that they fill out each day. Some may have a clock in and out system, and we're there to support our client in understanding that routine and reaching independence. Also implementing breaks, so that may be having our client understand when is the appropriate time to take a lunch break. Do they get a 15-minute break? Do they get a 30-minute break? Again, this varies what their shift may look like. We're there to support independence and comfortability in the workplace.
Okay, so once orientation and training is complete, this is now your employee. We are along to help with any kind of training. However, they are your employee. You are not paying the job coach to be there on the site with them. The job coach will help oversee any adjustments that need to be made on the workplace. The workplace performance will be observed to meet job expectations and achieve independence, and we've kind of touched on some of this. And again, we always encourage employers and coworkers to ask us questions so we can help educate. That's another part of our goal, is to educate the people around our consumers. And we like to rely on natural supports that are on the job site. Somebody that would help us exit the job site, as a prompt. They could use prompts like, hey, April, it's time for lunch, so the job coach doesn't have to be there to do that, but maybe one of their coworkers is happy to step in and be a natural support for them.
And, our client may be completely independent in their work routine, but something unpredictable comes up that day. And, we all like to have a friend at work to rely on in novel situations. So really just having that support until a job coach can come on site to really, figure out what that issue may be and then to problem solve.
So once the individuals become independent in their positions, we start to fade, which I had mentioned earlier, and this can look different for everybody. People learn at different different rates. And so we might have somebody who has gained independence on tasks in the middle of the day, but still needs help with clocking in. So we're there to ensure that they're clocking in correctly and getting started with their job. And then once they get into the flow of things, we may leave the site and then come back to help with end tasks and clocking out. So it just looks different for everybody. We talk about two different kinds of fading. One is proximity fading, where that could mean stepping back just a couple of steps and not doing hands-on instruction. That could mean unobtrusive observation from another room. They may or may not know that you're there watching them. And then we do off-site fading, where we will actually leave the job site. And this helps us kind of test to see if they are able to do their work independently.
Absolutely. And the fading process is something that we will 100% communicate to the manager. We like to have them in the know of this process to really help support the client to reaching independence. And again, this fading process will look different on every job site.
The consumer should know when we're fading. If the consumer's family is heavily involved, they should know that we're fading. So it should be a group effort, or at least a group acknowledgement that we are fading off of the site, with the understanding that we can come back if something is occurring.
Which brings us to follow along. So once our clients reach independence in their work routines and all adjustment to the job setting, we will then put them into a category called follow-along services. This means they've reached independence, we have now faded ourselves off-site, and they are performing up to standards and satisfaction of the employer. But this doesn't mean that we're gone. We are still behind the scenes, and we are happy to come back on site as much as possible. And some areas that may be of need for us to return to the job site are modifying tasks, that a new task may be added to the client's checklist or their task list. Also, maybe they're promoted because they're performing that well and they are moving up into a different position, or just gaining additional responsibilities that take some additional training as well. Or unfortunately, at times we may see some decrease in productivity, or maybe some issues that are going on with the client that we need to just come in and help them problem solve and get them back to feeling comfortable again with their position, and just really communicating with the employer about keeping them in that independent area and what we need to do to make that happen.
One thing we haven't talked about is, it may be implied, but we work when our consumers work. So if they work first shift, we're their first shift. If they work third shift, we're their third shift. And I have an example of somebody who was promoted and I needed to come back on the site. He moved into a team lead position, and he was very nervous. He was an individual who's with an ASD, and he just was nervous about moving into this lead position. He had the ability, but he wanted some moral support, and he wanted also to know if what he was doing on his first days, he was doing it correctly. So he was a third shift production worker, and I was there at 11 o'clock at night, ready for him to start in his new position and provide any kind of guidance that he needed. He had been in follow along for a long time, but I was able to get additional hours from our funding source, who is the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehab Services, to go back in there, make sure he was okay with his new role, and then faded back off, and he went back into follow along.
So in follow along, you'll expect to hear from us a couple times a month. Phone, email, on-person or on-site visits. Again, it really varies on that particular site and client.
And if somebody's in follow along, don't hesitate to contact us. We're happy to come in and address anything. We are making the initial effort to establish that communication with visiting on site or emailing or phone calling. But if something comes up, don't hesitate to give us a call. So some of the frequently asked questions would be, does the job coach on site only work with this client? And that answer is no. We all have caseloads of at least 20 people, but they're in varying, in situational assessment, job development, job site training. So we are able to mold our schedules around when our consumers are working. But the individual that you have hired is not the only person that job coach is working with.
And the job coach's day could look very different every day. One day they could be at a hotel and then off to a school system. The next day they could be in an office setting and then off to a doggy daycare. So the life of a job coach. It's real fun sometimes.
How long does a job coach staff a case? Well, we do our best to keep services to one coach. However, when changes in caseloads occur, maybe we have a job coach who is moved on to another position. I will transition that case to somebody else's caseload. So all of our job coaches are equally trained and credentialed, and so you have somebody who's as trained who would move into that position. And we want to make job development as quick as we can, even though we want to make it appropriate for that person. We want to make job site training appropriate for that person. So there's no real timeline on how long somebody will stay with the person, but we will follow them indefinitely after they get the job.
And we really strive to make good matches too. The employment specialist working with that particular client, if they have a really awesome rapport and there's all of these things that have been identified through their relationship working together, we're going to do our best to relay that to the new job coach and make sure that they're a good fit as well.
Another one is, will the job coach know the client? And we always provide our coaches with an overview of the client, as April just said, the job site, the task expectation, and we get to know these guys really, really well. We work with them very closely. We are able to kind of have our own vetting process before we place somebody. So we know if April has somebody on her caseload, she's found a great lead, but nobody fits because she understands the people that she works with, then she'll come to the next, she'll put it out to the team. I have this great lead, but I don't have a good fit for it. Does anybody else have a good fit for it? So we do get to know them very well. And then how can the employer best support the job coach? Really what we want is just open communication. We want you to reach out to us if there's an issue. We want you to reach out to us if something great's going on. We really want to be involved in the success of the individuals that we serve.
And not being afraid to think outside of the box. Sometimes advocating the business needs to us may have us come up with a great idea of a good fit for a task for that client. So just really being open to being creative in the process, as well as meeting your standards for your business.
Well, that brings us to the end of part 2 of What is a Job Coach? Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to post on the web board. And thanks for taking the time to listen to April and myself.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you, Rachel and April, for doing such a great job. I think that's covered a lot of territory today. There are a lot of good tips in there. We're going to go ahead and ask folks if they'd like to right now. Please type any questions that you might have over in our question and answer box, and we will address as many of them as we can. We typically take the questions that are going to help the most amount of people, and if there are questions in there that that may just be specific to your situation and may not help the full group, we may wait to take those offline. But right now, I'd love to give you a chance to type your questions in, and in the meantime, I have a few questions for Rachel myself. It was a great webinar, and I think that so much was covered that I don't have too many questions, but just for folks who are maybe just getting out of school and aren't very experienced yet, do you feel like university or training in this covers enough relationship building out in the community?
Probably not. Probably not. I think that should fall on or does fall on the employer to get that information across to the coaches, that the relationship building really is 50% of our job. We're constantly communicating with everybody on the team. So I don't know that there are online courses that could prepare somebody. We offer an ACRE certification that does touch on those kinds of things. But as far as like education, I don't know if that kind of topic is covered for this particular job.
So when you say that the employer has to take care of it, or kind of at least get it initiated, you mean if a new VR counselor is working in the field and they work in a new agency, then there are usually supports in place at the place where at the VR agency where folks work that that should be geared more towards working at building relationships with employers. So you mentioned a certification. Is that something that we could include maybe either in the chat box, or can we include it with our email tomorrow for folks to know about CRCs?
Yes, we can include it in the email tomorrow. I know our next ACRE certification will be this summer.
Okay.
I think it's run twice a year. Sometimes it's run 3 times a year. So I can get that information to you so you can send it in the email tomorrow.
Super, that would be great. And if someone is going to, maybe gets out of school and is going to a new community, how would you recommend they go about building the relationships? Is it usually something like a ride along with someone who already works at the agency, or?
That's how we do it. There's a couple of ways. I will pair a new employment specialist with a more advanced or experienced employment specialist, so they can shadow for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to just kind of be thrown to the wolves and go make these relationships. But we also talk about our friends and family networks, starting with them, starting with the consumers' friends and family networks. Who do they know that works in an office that might be hiring? Who do they know that works at a university that can maybe connect you with HR? So that's the friends and family network is really a big one.
Yeah, it's not always what you know. A lot of the times it's who you know.
Absolutely. I mean, most of us probably, or at least a lot of us, got our jobs because we knew somebody who knew somebody.
Yep. Well, a lot of us do a lot of the time. So I imagine that when you're in a profession, if you're in professional groups too, that can be a good way to find out about
Definitely.
jobs for VR counselors, but also network with other people who might have resources to share.
Definitely.
I had a question that wasn't in the QA box. It was from someone else. There are a lot of folks these days who, just as we are, do a lot of things online. And what the person was asking me about was, how do you help people who are used to using technology like emails or texting or chatting? How do you help new VR counselors get out there, get out from behind the email, and build those actual personal relationships? Is there anything that you feel helps in that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit in the webcast when we said using those job boards it's not the best way to make those connections, because that information is available to everybody and their mother.
Right.
So I think just educating new VR counselors that getting in front of people is how you're going to establish those relationships. And something I always say is, well, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
People like to talk about themselves. Employers like to talk about themselves, especially if they enjoy what they're doing. So a lot of times you might think this is a weird thing to go ask an employer to just tell me about you, but people enjoy doing that. So that's a good way to start establishing relationships. Also knowing your audience. If you're looking for something in a restaurant, don't show up at noon when it's busy, because they're not going to have time to talk to you.
Right.
So kind of getting an idea of who your audience is, and just being smart about your communication tactics.
Yeah, it's not a matter of you can send an email out to an employer and just think that they're going to get back to you and say, hey, I want your wonderful people right now. It takes a little bit more effort and a little bit more face time.
But sometimes that technology is really useful too. Like LinkedIn, I don't use it to look for employment.
Mhm.
But if I'm having a hard time getting past a gatekeeper, I will go to LinkedIn and try to see who is the hiring manager at XYZ business.
Sure.
So it's good to get information, and those things work,
Mhm.
but I think we know that face-to-face communication is what is most effective.
Yeah, I think so. That seems to be the case with most of our speakers that we've had the webinar series. They agree that having that relationship building face to face is a little bit more personal, and they can picture in their head who they're talking to, and it's just not just some anonymous uh, voice on a phone line.
Right.
So, well, I'm looking over here and we have quite a number of questions. Um, I believe the person is asking about the ACRE certification. Cheryl asks, is the job coaching certification available online, and does it have a fee or a course fee attached to it?
It does. I believe it's $400, and it's offered through VCU. And you can go to vcurrtc.org and look at trainings, and there will be a list of the different trainings that are coming up. And
Super.
it might give you a price too.
Perfect. Can that be included with all the information we're sending tomorrow?
Yep.
All right, super. Thanks so much for that question. The next question I have is from Alexis. She asks, how do you find out if a certain employer is willing to do the situational assessment? Are companies and workplaces required to say yes to the assessment? That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good question. They are not required to say yes at all. My tactic was always to start the conversation with, taking the pressure off of the employer by saying, I'm not looking for employment right now. I'm working with somebody and we're trying to determine what would be a good job goal for that person. Do you mind if we come in and volunteer for you for a couple of hours, unpaid? Some employers will even want to pay the person, so that's really on the employer. But that's not a pressure that we put on them. In fact, we try to say volunteer, so it sounds better to them.
Well, and it kind of goes along with that, the marketing principle that we all need to use when we're marketing ourselves. And from the employer's perspective, they're thinking, what's in it for me? And
Right.
well, if they're getting some volunteer time to take care of some tasks, then that really makes sense. So I think we'll go on to next question is this a don't? Yes, I will answer that later. Okay. Lynn asks, how often do you use work incentives?
You mean Social Security work incentives?
It wasn't specified, so let's have you answer that, and if the person needs clarification, we'll have them type into the chat box again.
Okay. So we have marketing materials that that explain the work opportunity tax credit. Some businesses, which is a work incentive from Social Security, some businesses take advantage of that. Some don't feel like going through the process. It's not a huge amount of money for the business. It depends on how much that person is being paid. And then we also, DARS, our state's VR agency, can connect them with a benefits counselor who can explain the other Social Security work incentives, like impairment-related work expenses and all those different work incentives provided by Social Security. Are there other clarifying questions about that?
I do. It says yes, but also tax credits.
Yes, and that's the work opportunity tax credit I was speaking about, that we give them information on how to obtain that tax credit, the employer.
That sounds great. Thank you for answering that, Rachel. My next question I have is from Edwin. It says, do you still come across misconceptions about people with disabilities and what they can bring to the table for an employer? In your position, how do you address these misconceptions when assisting a client that could be a good match for a particular employer?
Of course, we still come across that. Unfortunately, in 2020, we do still come across those misconceptions. I think it's on those of us in the field to continue to to educate people around us, even on your day off, you know, and talk about if you catch somebody being rude or not even intentionally being rude, but just unaware that what they said was inappropriate, you know, try to say it and try to correct them in the nice way and explain why it is the way it is, and that that person's not wheelchair bound, that person is using a wheelchair, you know what I
Right.
mean? And I don't think people, I do think there are people who are not nice, but I think for the most part, people just aren't aware of, you know, the fact that people with disabilities can work. And I love the opportunity to prove to people that people with disabilities can work. And one way we can get in front of that is offering, and I think we did touch on this in the webcast, is offering disability awareness training to businesses, whether they're going to hire somebody or not. We
Right.
can provide that kind of training for them, and they can, you know, if nothing else, tick it off that they've done it for their diversity plan, sorry.
Sure.
So I think it's on us to educate and to proactively get in front of these employers and talk about people with disabilities working.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, along with some people maybe are rude, but other people are just worried that they're going to, you know, offend somebody. So I'm sure you have it on both sides of the spectrum with that.
I had a really interesting email the other day from the Department of Health. They were reaching out because they've hired somebody who uses a wheelchair, and they realized we don't have any kind of disability awareness training for our employees, and we'd like to add that to our regular onboarding training.
Right.
And he said, and in his email, he said, we hired somebody who is wheelchair bound. And at the bottom of that paragraph, he said, for instance, I just used the term wheelchair bound, and I don't know if that's appropriate or not. So, you know, he was self-aware enough to go, I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that.
Right.
You know.
He checked himself, so
Yep,
that's
it was
great.
interesting.
Yeah. Daniel has a question. What qualifications do you look for when hiring a prospective employment specialist? So more broadly, what is usually looked at in terms of experience and education for that?
So we definitely like to see somebody with a degree in human services, but that doesn't exclude other people. We've hired people with art backgrounds because that tells us that they're going to be creative in their and the supports that they implement on site, you know, or that they could be. Somebody who was in sales before might be really good at that job development piece because they can sell the services and sell the consumer's abilities. So really, not an introvert, somebody who doesn't like to be in front of people, somebody who, I don't know, doesn't want to be hands-on is not the person that you're looking for. You want a people person. You want somebody that's okay with hearing the word no, because we hear the word no a lot, you know, and they're not going to have their feelings hurt. So really, when I'm looking to hire somebody, I want to know that they can communicate clearly. I want to know that they believe in what we're doing and that it's not just a job, it's a mission. And the degree and education is important, but the person to me is more important. And I get to feel that person out, you know, in the interview and phone calls and things like that.
So actually we have quite a few questions. The follow-up for the person who was talking about work incentives, she had another follow-up question. Any ADA accessibility? I'm not sure what the question was. Lynn, maybe can you go into a little bit more depth? I'm going to go ahead and dismiss this question, and please give us the rest of the question so that it's in context a little bit more. Let's see here. We have someone who mentions that ACRE certification is also offered locally, not just VCU. Do a search of your local colleges and universities to see if they offer it. Here in Vermont, Community College of Vermont offers it. Thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing that information with us. Kayla has a question about working with bigger corporations, and I believe you touched on it a little bit by trying to get past gatekeeper going through LinkedIn, but Keela asks, in my experience, big corporations often don't want to deal with situational assessments. Any tips for convincing them to make time? Thanks for this great presentation. So beyond what you mentioned before with LinkedIn and kind of getting around that gatekeeper, do you have any other strategies for bigger corporations?
Um, you may want to be patient with them, because the person that you speak to, and I'm thinking of like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, and this is an experience that I've had, the person that you're speaking to is not the person that can make the decision.
Right.
So they've got to go up the chain of command, and that can take time. So I personally believe that I don't want to waste time waiting for the bigger corporation, for the person that can say yes to get back to me, that a smaller business that does similar work is going to be the easier, quicker route to go. You know, we want to be good stewards of the state's money. We don't want to spend a lot of time billing them because we're contacting over and over and over and over again. So thinking about that is important too. But I mean, persistence is another, you know, strategy. But I think the more effective strategy is just moving to the next business who can give you that yes.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to beat your head against the wall.
Right. And it's not that that person at the larger corporation doesn't want to help you. They just don't have the decision-making power, even if it's a store manager sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes it's out of their control. So our next question we have, let's see here. Could we use job coaching if we're working with a client with a mental illness and the client is not comfortable disclosing? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, disclosure is it can be tricky. I mean, that is on the person. That is not our decision to make.
Right, definitely.
So the way you just communicate, I can't disclose what this person's disability is, but I'm here. And you don't even have to say the word disability. You can just say, I help individuals find jobs and I help them maintain their jobs. It can, like I said, it can be tricky. Who's this weirdo that's just showing up, you know, on the job site with this person if the employer doesn't have the context that that person has a disability. I do think that that supported and customized employment is becoming more of a known thing out there in the world. And so people are aware of what job coaches are and could, you know, hopefully understand that that's the reason you are there. But disclosure is definitely tricky.
Yeah, I think it is mostly in any situation, even if people don't have job coaches. I think disclosure is one of those things that it seems to be becoming less and less of a stigma, but
Right.
Just things like the Job Accommodation Network, their suggestions for folks with different kinds of challenges. Those have always been interesting for me to read, just to find out what some of the accommodations can be, especially the question was about folks with mental illness. And there's a lot of room to help get folks employed. And if the employers are a little open-minded and flexible, then really they can have a great employee that they may not otherwise have been able to have had they not made a little bit of adjustment to how the person can work within the environment.
And we can also support in different ways. Instead of, you know, somebody with mental illness may not need a task analysis or reminders on the phone or this or that, but we can text and check in and say, how are you doing? And if things aren't going well, provide suggestions, like maybe you want to go take a water break, or, you know, so there's different ways that we can provide support without hovering over somebody.
Well, and sometimes I think people are in distress, but they don't recognize that they're in distress because it's something that happens to them.
Right.
And they're used to it, but if you're in a job situation, most of the time people don't want to, you know, have anything happen in front of coworkers. It's a little bit, they might feel uncomfortable having other people know. But that sounds really reasonable. The next question I have is, I serve persons with intellectual disabilities that require long-term job coaching supports. A lot of the time, a lot of the times job coaching isn't available for 8 to 10 month periods of time due to finding, transitioning of staff, etc. How do we maintain continuity of service for those who need long-term support? Oh, I'm sorry, she corrected it. It says coaching isn't available for 8 to 10 months period of time due to funding and transition of staff. So maintaining continuity in that type of situation.
That's, you know, something that we struggle with too. When we do our annual plan every year, one of the things that we talk about as being a potential risk for us is when our VR agency goes into order of selection,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't, you know, fund the long-term training. One workaround, and I don't know, I know that the waiver is different across the states, but in Virginia, there are a finite amount of waiver slots, and they are usually left for people with very significant disabilities, or they don't have family support, or their living situation is terrible. So it's hard to get a waiver, and once you get it, you don't let go of it because it provides so many supports.
Right.
So in Virginia, if we have somebody who needs that significant long-term intervention, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
intervention, and DARS will pay as much as they will pay, and then they're like, we can't pay anymore. If they've got the waiver, then that service transitions over to waiver as the funding source.
Sure.
So like I said, I know it's different in different states, how the waiver works,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean, it's definitely, when they go into order of selection, you know, it can be tough for agencies like ours to
Right.
provide that service.
And Rachel, do you think that if folks are looking for information, they can go to their state's DARS website and find out about waiver programs? Is that a place they'd go, or should they go to their DVR for their state?
Probably the DVR.
Okay.
I would think. Well, and you know, any VR agency, any state VR agency should at least be able to point you in the right direction. If they don't have the information, they should be able to point you in the right direction of where to go to get that information.
Super. That's great. Just anticipating a question we might get. Let's see here. How do you deal with retention when the management of an employer changes after fading and the new manager changes the conditions for the employee with disabilities? So I think what Twila is asking is, maybe have you ever had instances where one manager was in there and was willing to have folks with disabilities try out the jobs, or just go in and job shadow, and then a new manager comes in and isn't willing to do that?
Well, I heard it differently. I heard it somebody in follow along, so I'll respond to both.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody who's been employed and has a management shift, we see that all the time. All the
Mm-hmm.
time. I think it's really on us to make sure we are keeping up that communication with management there. And when we know that there's going to be a change, we make an effort to get in front of the new manager
Sure.
and communicate about how long that person's been there, what their job has been, how they've been an asset to the company, and just so they know that you are still there. Even if
Mm-hmm.
you're not there all the time, you're still there. You can still provide support, and if necessary, you can come back for an extended period. For other managers who are not open with the way you worded it, or at least the way I heard you explain it, if there's a management who was okay with letting us come in and do assessments or job shadowing or that kind of thing, and a new manager is now not okay with those things, again, I'm going to talk about communication all the
Mm-hmm.
time. It's really about providing information and just saying, this is how we did it before. You know, it could be a benefit to you. And again, if you're beating your head against the wall, let's move to the next person.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And it sounds like, again, with the relationship building, and if you get ahead of a new manager coming in and do the relationship building, then it seems like with all the relationship building, it might take a little bit more time investment at the beginning, but it can pay off later. Maybe if if they're looking for more employees, if you have that relationship built, even if it's somebody who's new, then you know, you've done the courtesy to go out there and um, uh, put a face to a name and
Right.
make sure that also that you can support other people or other folks who might be a good job fit. So that makes a lot of sense. I've found myself that relationship building at the front end
Mhm.
makes other things easy on the other end of things.
Yeah, and it could take time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're in a project right now that communication started a year and a half ago, and we are now moving forward with a big corporation quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's taken us a year and a half to get there. But it's
Right.
been about that relationship building, and now it's
Mhm.
paying off.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes you have to exercise your patience muscle. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Going back to Lynn, she's the lady who had asked about the uh, the work incentives earlier,
Mhm.
and she clarified her questions. Have have employers helped them? Have they helped employers become physically accessible, remodeling automatic doors, adjustable
Gotcha.
desks, and restroom changes? Thank you, Lynn, for clarifying that.
Um, I have not seen an employer, you know, add a ramp or something like that in my experience. That's not to say that it, you know, it wouldn't happen for somebody else. I haven't
Right.
seen remodeling like that, but I've definitely seen, you know, adjustable desks and, you know, calling in a rehab engineer to figure out how to best accommodate a work setting. You know, a rehab engineer could also put bars in a bathroom and that
Mm,
kind of thing. They have brilliant minds. But like I said, in my experience, I haven't seen a remodel necessarily, but employers are typically open to adjusting the work area, if that makes sense.
yeah. It reminds me of a little comic strip that I saw one time, and it was one of the maintenance people at a school, and he was there were a set of stairs and a ramp, and someone said, "Can you shovel the ramp first, because everybody can use that, and you know, if the person has a wheelchair, then." If the stairs get cleared first, then only people who can navigate stairs would be able to benefit. But if
Right.
the ramp gets cleared, everybody benefits right away. So, yeah, all those little funny cartoons.
Well,
Um,
we see that across the board. If we've done something that's going to benefit one of the people that we work with, a lot of times employers implement it across the board because it
right.
benefits everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of goes along with universal design too, so
Right.
that you're making it with everybody in mind, not just a person who is working with a disability or anybody else who isn't. So yeah, that seems real smart. I do have a couple more questions here. Oh, Regina makes a statement, you always want to make sure the employer will allow a job coach before accepting the job.
That's
Um,
true.
yeah, that's a good thing to point out. Thanks, Regina. Let's see, our next question
I have
then.
I have an example about that. I a few years
Oh,
ago
sure, cool.
placed somebody at an Aubon PAM. You know what that is?
Yes, yeah.
Um, and they didn't. It's a small one in a
Mm-hmm.
hospital, and the job coach being there was in the way. And they were fine with me, you know, observing on the other side of the door.
Right.
Um, but really, how I implemented supports then was just being able to be available by phone,
Mm-hmm.
to text message, to call, and that kind of thing. So yes, you do not want to aggravate an employer by being in the way,
Yeah.
and you want their blessing to be on the
Mm-hmm.
job site. But if you can't be on the job site, and we were talking about this with the mental illness earlier, there are other ways that you can support without being right next to somebody.
Definitely. If someone gets a job in a kiosk or a coffee stand, it's
Right.
really going to be difficult to fit two
Right.
people in there a lot of the time, or more people. Um, let's see. Moving forward, Elizabeth asks, and I think this would be just for everybody. And I don't know if you have a resource like this available, but maybe if you don't, we can point someone in the right direction. Elizabeth is asking if you have a list of employers found in different states that have been cooperative and willing to hire individuals with disabilities. So since you're based in Virginia, is there any kind of resource or website that you know about that exists that would disclose some of the employers that are open to hiring folks with disabilities?
I'm sorry. I can't think of one off the top of my head. I can ask around here and see if there is something
Sure.
like that that's available. We had compiled a list of people that we knew. So obviously, if they come to us, they're going to have a disability, but sometimes they
Right.
also have a criminal conviction.
Oh,
So
sure.
we had a list compiled of employers in the area that we knew would hire individuals with a criminal history.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably on our intranet somewhere.
Sure.
But I can find out if there is that kind of resource available for states.
And also, I'd like to throw it out to anyone in our audience. Does anybody know of a list like that? And would you mind sharing it in the chat and or the Q&A? Be very helpful. And that's one of the reasons why we have webinars and we have the question and answer in chat is so that people can share and learn from each other. So if anybody has any ideas about that, we'd be glad to take them. Otherwise, Elizabeth, we'll do a little poking around after the webinar and see if there is or isn't anything like that available. So I'm going to go ahead and record the question. And since our website platform does not allow me to copy and paste, I'm just going to take a picture with my iPhone. There we go. So thanks, Elizabeth, for that question. We'll see what we can find out for you. Let's see. Letitia asks or says, I have clients who do their own job searches in collaboration with their job coaches. Some clients do not indicate on the application when asked that they have a disability. I believe this is setting them up to not receive reasonable accommodations on a job if necessary. What's the proper thing to do? I think it's that timing of disclosure
Right.
question again, isn't it?
Right. I worked with a guy years ago who was sure that if he indicated he had a disability, he would not get the job.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on me to explain to him that if you need an accommodation, you need to answer this question correctly. Otherwise, the employer is not, responsible if they've not provided an accommodation because you've not disclosed that you would need an accommodation.
Right.
So it's, again, that is that tricky topic of disclosure and people, and it's such a personal choice whether to disclose or not. And you mentioned, the stigma is going away. And I would say that most of the people that we work with, 95% of them don't mind disclosing and
Right.
they'd rather you do it. But there are that small group of people that just don't want to disclose. And I just think it takes conversations with them as to why it's important that they do indicate that they have a disability so they can receive that accommodation. I mean,
And
maybe bringing in mom, if mom is a good support, and
right.
or maybe they've got a great relationship with their VR counselor, bringing that person in and just helping them to understand, again, in
Right.
the end, that is their decision to make, but helping them to understand the benefit of disclosing and indicating that you have a disability.
Yeah, I know that just with the state of Wisconsin, with the employment forms for a job with the state, they ask you to check a box whether or not you have a disability, but you don't have to put any more information than
Right.
that. So it may be something that's being treated or is in remission. So I think that there are a lot of different reasons that folks could check that because employers really shouldn't make assumptions about what that might mean.
Right.
But having them covered right away, having the applicant covered right away is a great idea because otherwise they may not be able to get accommodations later on. So I think that's a kind of a depends upon, but definitely a thing about timing, about disclosure too. So Seth, I believe this question was answered before, but I'll go ahead and pop it out there. Rachel, Seth asks, how do you deal with the liability issues in regards to a job coach being on site? I think you mentioned that in Virginia, your agency covers like you and April and folks who are in that position with their own liability insurance.
Right.
So
Our employer would cover it, and our VR agency covers the consumer should something happen during like a situational assessment.
oh, okay. I don't know if that would be the case across the boards. People should check with their employers, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if something happened to you while you were working, your employer would cover you.
Right.
So, I mean, I would assume. So for the VCU employees, the VCU employment specialists, should something happen, we are covered by our employer. If something happened to the consumer after they are an employee, their company would cover them and with their workers' comp.
All right. Let's see. We have quite a few questions
See that.
left. Oh, Susan, thank you for mentioning. She put a resource in the question and answer, www.monster.com/career-advice/article/disability-friendly-companies. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that up in the questions. And I think, Carly, I'm not sure if we can answer this one or not. Rachel, you did mention folks with backgrounds in adjudication or criminal backgrounds. Carly's asking, in working with people with mental disabilities, she's come across situations when the clients may have been arrested or involved and has some kind of criminal background during the application process. And when meeting with the employer, what's the appropriate way to disclose the information? I know in the application process, it sometimes asks if you have any criminal history. I've seen that on job applications before. Have you been convicted of
Sure.
something?
I think keeping in the back of your mind the kind of industry that you're looking for, what the barrier crimes would be in that industry. So like, I'm just trying to think of an example. We were working with an assisted living facility one time, and I forget what the person's charge was, but they were hired because that particular crime was not considered a barrier crime in that industry. So, you know, you can ask an HR person, what would be a barrier crime to working with you all. So getting that information up front is good info to have in your back pocket before you start applying to positions. I think honesty is the best, you know, method. You just want to talk about it. I worked with somebody before with a sexual criminal history, and we were honest. You know, he had a letter prepared that he gave to employers that obviously didn't go into detail, but said, I have a charge and this is the charge. And, you know, he didn't even have to speak about it. He would give it to them. So like I said, honesty is always going to be the best policy, because God forbid you know, don't disclose or lie about the charges, and then it comes out, then now your reputation with the employer is tarnished, and obviously the employee's reputation, and that could cause them to lose their job.
Yeah, I think that that is not one where it's easier to get forgiven than to get permission. You want to get permission first on that particular case. So let's see. Another question I have. Let's see. Here we go. Maybe a bit off topic. Is it true that employers are allowed to pay those with disabilities less money because they have a disability? I think this is in the case if they're coming in and have offered to pay, but I'm not sure. Could we maybe we can take it both ways.
I think there are still workshops that exist that pay people sub minimum wage.
Right.
They are going away, but they still exist. They're still right here in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm sure in whichever area that you guys are in. We would never pursue something like that. We would never pursue anything that wasn't at least minimum wage. And really what you're looking for is not just at least minimum wage, but a wage that is equal to somebody else who is doing the same job. If they get
Right.
$11 an hour, then the person with a disability gets paid $11 an hour and
Right.
not given 25.
Yep, that makes sense. Kayla McFarland, you said, anyone know of any resources for Missouri? And I put in the chat box the Monster link to career advice article, disability friendly companies. Hopefully that will give you a little boost or help you get going in the right direction. Let's see, Douglas says, since you have a relationship with VR counselors, what do you expect from them prior to meeting with new clients?
Just, whatever information they can give us. If they have a criminal history, that would be good to know. That obviously what their disability is, if their communication style, just whatever information they can give us on the front end would better prepare us to meet them, when we do our initial intake interview.
Definitely. And he has a follow-up question. Thanks, Douglas. Also, when a client with hearing loss is referred to you, what accommodations do you offer during job coach time? That's a good question.
Yeah, and I think that it excludes a lot of agencies. We don't have anybody here that's an interpreter,
Right.
and it's not fair. I worked with somebody, my mom used to be an interpreter, and I can sign a little bit, but I
Right.
could never carry on a conversation that was important if I had to. So I happened to actually work with a client who was deaf, and she was fine with my level of signing because she enjoyed teaching me.
Right.
But when somebody uses ASL, it's not fair to them to not have an interpreter with them,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're communicating about what that person's going to be paid and what the expectations are and that kind of thing. So if you don't have staff on hand that can communicate effectively, VR will pay for, at least in Virginia, VR will pay for an interpreter
Mm-hmm.
during that process.
Sure. Well, that makes complete sense. Where we live in Wisconsin with our grade school education, we have a lot of rural areas, and so they have a person, an interpreter who's just based out of one of the organizations in the local area, and their interpreters travel because they don't have enough students in one school who
Right.
are deaf that they would need to have the interpreter there all the time. So having them come in or having them maybe consult or be the consultant for that. It seems, especially during the beginning phase of trying to put in your application, you want to make the best impression possible. And even if a person with hearing loss issues is pretty comfortable with maybe lip reading, um, you don't want to miss anything in a job interview. So,
Right, absolutely. Or, if they're getting in trouble for something,
mm-hmm,
I couldn't sign fast enough to tell her what she was getting in trouble for when she threw
right?
the bug against the wall.
Yeah, yep,
Um,
definitely.
so, I mean, I don't know if there's legal ramifications for it, but um, I would just say better safe than sorry, have that interpreter with you. I can't hear you anymore. I can't hear you. Nope.
Can you hear?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my audio settings went wonky for my headset, so hopefully I won't have too much echo. Let's see. Okay. Uh, let's see. Susan put the link to the monster article. Susan also shared one from respectability.org, resources, employers embracing employees disabilities / I've popped that into the chat. If anybody checks them out and finds out that I've typed them wrong, please let me know. Let's see here. Gosh, just gotta scroll down here in my questions. Oh, another great resource is, thank you, Susan, for all of these, https www.wrp.gov/WRP. So there's a great one. And Ashley shared https://abilityjobs.com, ABILITYJOBS.com. So thank you so much for these resources that folks are sharing with us. And let me see, such great suggestions. I have to sort them out from the questions. And someone else mentioned the Jan guides. So Katrina has, I think, maybe more of a comment than a question. She went to the Arizona Work Center and they shared that a lot of probation offices have a job board and employers can only post if they are willing to hire people with a felony. Be mindful the company is only obligated, from what I understand, to hire X amount of people with a felony, but again, they can only post on this job if they're willing. Is that something you've ever run into, Rachel? It sounds like a good way to get people connected.
Not personally. I mean, I've heard of lists like that.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't, just my own experience, I haven't worked with too many people with a criminal history, so it just isn't something that I've personally come across, but that's great information.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see here. All right, the ability jobs that Ashley had posted, she mentions that it's listed as the largest job site for people with disabilities. It lists employers and career fairs. Thank you, Ashley, for that. I'm going to try and pick up all of these websites and put them also in the chat. Let's see. Tracy asks, do you know of any resources that might provide checklists of skills required for specific jobs? What do you need to be able to do, to be a bagger at a grocery store, bus dishes, etc.? Does the OMW do that?
I'm not sure. I would say stay away from looking for lists like that, though. You know, with the big employer that we are working with, they were asking for a matrix like that, and we were like, you know, why don't you tell us what you're interested in, and we will find the right person for you. So,
Right.
you know, the job coach obviously can go in and do the task analysis and break down those different pieces of those jobs. And I think with the experience and all the, I mean, you become a jack of all trades, you know, with the experience comes the knowledge of, well, the bagger at this particular grocery store is probably going to do the same thing at this other grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know of any resources that would list that kind of information. I'm sorry that don't have that information. But I think with experience comes the knowledge of what's involved in these different kinds of jobs. And just,
Sure.
I think asking the employer would be appropriate also.
And I've found in my experience, just as a person seeking a job when I was just getting out of college, a lot of the times they didn't want me to know anything about what I was getting into because they had a certain way they wanted to train me to do it. So sometimes a blank slate is best. I think, Tracy, you might be able to go, I think that you might be able to go to, I believe it's an OSER website that has descriptions of jobs, and it also talks about market growth, which jobs are growing, which jobs are in decline, and it lists things about what may be involved in this job, like lifting or sorting or things like that. So
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say there is the dictionary of occupational titles that you could literally put in like fish sorter, and it would give you what is involved in that. So I apologize. There is that website it's really interesting too, just to kind of surf through and see the gazillions of jobs there and how they list what's involved in those positions.
And Ashley, it just made me so thankful for my job today. I do not want to be a fish sorter. Let's see here. Regina mentions, I'm a VR counselor. VR used to count sheltered workshops as employment, but no longer do. One thing about workshops is they shouldn't be discounted. My brother worked in one for years, and if not for this, he wouldn't have had anywhere else to go. He was very happy there. That seems to be the case with some people, and some people's families seem to support it because it seems to be a place where people can go, and if their coworkers also have similar disabilities, then they know that the employer is going to take care with their safety. So any ideas on middle ground there, or compromises that can be made?
I think, I talked about my mom before, but she was also a VR counselor. And she battles with me over this and says exactly that. For some people, it is, and of course it's everybody's choice. I'm not going to preach to anybody what the better personal decision is for that family. I think what we're looking at is just ensuring that somebody's being paid for the work that they're doing at least minimum wage. And that, we work with people with varying levels of disability and have been really successful in placing somebody who, and I don't like to use the word placement, but helping somebody find a job who you might not think could have worked. So I would just say, just weigh your options that are out there. And if you feel like a workshop is what works best for your family, then that's what works for your family.
Right. And Regina follows up saying, I understand, I just don't want them to be discounted. So I think that if it's sheltered work, I think, and Regina made a point earlier in one of her chats that the person that she knew, it wasn't about the paycheck, it was about them being able to work.
Right.
And having workshops at sub-minimum wage doesn't seem real ethical, but having sheltered workshops for people to work in so that their families feel safe having them do that, I think that there can be some middle ground there, and it's going to depend on the person, right?
Absolutely. And just because that's not the route that we go, I mean, my brain is trained to VCU and kind of what we do, and I don't mean to discredit anybody else in my conversations.
Right. And I think just with this forum, I think it's a good place for people to, ask questions and be open-minded about the answers. I don't think that anyone here comes to a webinar because they think they know all the stuff. So thanks, Regina, for asking all those questions. That's great. Let's see here. I have a couple I can't hear yous, but I think we took care of that. And let's see. I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. Gosh, this is a lot of questions. This is just wonderful. A lot of the time we don't get this many, and this has just been fantastic. So we do in the question and answer panel, if anybody wants to go in there, we do have all the recommended websites from other people, but I'm just going to record these quickly so that we can send them out in the email. We can even give them to you, Rachel.
Okay.
Let's see here. I think that's all of them. I'm just going to throw it out there. And if anybody else has any questions, let's see here. I jotted down a couple of questions, and one of them was you had talked earlier about training for employers and for consumers and bosses and coworkers. So I don't know if it would be called sensitivity training because that's what they called it a decade or so ago for other issues. But what does that usually look like? Is it, you know, maybe an hour-long seminar on how to use person first language and
That's in our slides.
okay.
Let me see if I have a. I thought I might have had a printed out version of it, and I can kind of go through the slides, but I don't. But it really is a history of people with disabilities working and how it started that people were institutionalized, and now here we are at competitive integrated employment and kind of the process there. We talk about some strategies that we have seen that worked for supports, from your iPhone alarms to posting up little reminders on somebody's cubicle and all of those different things in between. We've talked about communication strategies. We will get information from our consumers and say, what do you want your employer to know about you? How do you want them to communicate with you? What's the best supervision style that works for you? What do you like to do on your day off? Just some info, an about me kind of thing. So before they get started, or maybe have even met the person, well, in most cases they will have met the person, but before they get started, they have some good background information on them. So we talk about person first language. We talk about terms to try to stay away from, like the R word and challenged and you know, things like that. So it's not a huge, the one that we're currently using isn't a huge PowerPoint. It might take us about a half an hour to get through, because we keep people listening to us, you know. And then that provides them to, you know, then open up the floor for questions, and, you know, then we can have a dialogue about it. So we've kept it kind of short, but with the intention of being able to talk about it afterwards.
Right. And I think that one of the things that you know, folks who aren't necessarily conversant in vocational rehabilitation, it seems like a good idea to keep in mind is that you really don't want someone to feel othered, and that everybody is individual and has different preferences. Like I have a friend who uses a wheelchair, and we were talking about you know, things to, she was talking about decorating her wheelchair, and she said she thought it might be nice to have spikes on the handles so that people wouldn't just grab her wheelchair and start wheeling her around. So it's a matter of asking and finding out, you know, what the person needs for help. But I don't know that I don't know that people wouldn't want to answer questions like that. I mean, it is something that might be uncomfortable, but probably more uncomfortable for the asker. Sometimes. So any recommendations on how people can offer to help?
Offer to help. Go to the HR department or hiring managers and say, I have a training that I can present to you. And nobody wants to, the reason we've kept it kind of short is because people don't want to feel like they're being preached at. You know what I mean? So if we hit some high points and talk about some important things that we think are important factors. And I think you can just say, we offer a training. I can come in and train you, you know, and I think the hope is, yes, please hire somebody also, but I wouldn't put pressure on people. I think, you know, that organizational marketing, getting in front of people down the road might pay off if you provide that training to somebody today.
Well, and, you know, since every person is different, you know, and people with disabilities included, it's going to be individual how you help people and how you approach it. Some people, you know, welcome questions, and, you know, some people are a little more uncomfortable with that. So it's kind of, again, a personality and case by case basis, I'm sure. So I just want to thank everybody for the questions, and it looks like we're nearly at half past the hour. So thank you so much, Rachel, for answering these questions and for the great presentation. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jen. She's going to talk a little bit about getting your CRCs and any other information that we'll be sending along to you. So Jen, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Heidi.
Well, thank you, Heidi and Rachel. It was a great conversation today. If you are in need of the CRC for today's webcast, the link I just added to the chat box contains steps to request the CRC. This can be found on our webcast page within our website at projectd3.com. You will also receive an email tomorrow with these instructions and where to find our archived webcasts along with any resources. Our next webcast is titled, What is Possible When Systems Truly Collaborate?, which is in 2 weeks on Thursday, February 27th at 11 a.m. Central Time. And that wraps up today's webcast. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
attending,
guys.
everyone. All right, bye-bye.
Bye.